Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. My sister Brooke and I had been driving since noon, crossing from Ohio into Kentucky on our way to visit our mom in Nashville. She had just gotten out of surgery, hip replacement, and we wanted to surprise her before the weekend. Brooke was 2 years older than me, the responsible one who always insisted on planning every detail of every trip. But that night, even she admitted we had pushed too far. The highway stretched endlessly through farmland and patches of dense forest, and by 11 at night, my eyes burned from staring at taillights and yellow lane markers. We had passed the last lit gas station about 40 minutes back, and the caffeine from my third gas station coffee had worn off somewhere around the state line. Brooke suggested we pull over at the next rest stop just for 20 minutes, stretch our legs and splash some water on our faces. I agreed without hesitation. My graduation from nursing school 2 years prior had taught me plenty about exhaustion, and I knew we were both running on fumes. The rest stop appeared like a mirage after another 15 miles of nothing but darkness and the occasional reflective deer eyes glinting from the tree line. A faded green sign announced it half a mile ahead, and I flicked on my turn signal more out of habit than necessity since we had not seen another car in at least 10 minutes. The parking lot was small, maybe 20 spaces total, with a squat brick building housing the restrooms at the far end. A single overhead lamp buzzed near the building entrance, casting a weak orange glow that barely reached the pavement below. Everything else sat in shadow. I pulled our Toyota Camry into a spot near the entrance, close to the restrooms, and that is when I noticed the only other vehicle there. A black SUV, something large like a Tahoe or Suburban, parked at the opposite end of the lot near the tree line. Every single window was tinted so dark I could not tell if anyone was inside. The engine was off, no lights, no movement. Brooke glanced at it and made a small sound in her throat, something between acknowledgement and unease, but neither of us said anything. We were too tired to read into things. Brooke grabbed her purse and opened the passenger door, and the night air hit us immediately, thick and humid with that earthy smell of summer in the south. Crickets screamed from the woods surrounding the rest stop, so loud it almost felt aggressive. I stepped out and stretched my back, feeling every vertebra pop after hours of hunching behind the wheel. The brick restroom building looked ancient, probably built sometime in the 70s and never updated since. Graffiti covered the walls near the entrance, crude drawings and phone numbers and the usual obscenities people carve into public spaces. A vending machine stood beside the women's door, its front panel cracked and dark, clearly out of order for months or maybe years. Brooke walked ahead of me, her sandals slapping against the concrete, and I followed a few steps behind. Neither of us looked back at the SUV. I told myself there was nothing unusual about another vehicle at a rest stop, even at this hour. Truckers pulled over all the time. Families on road trips stopped to let their kids use the bathroom. I was being paranoid because I was exhausted, and exhaustion makes everything feel threatening. That is what I kept repeating in my head as I pushed open the bathroom door. The inside of the restroom smelled like industrial cleaner mixed with something sour underneath, like mildew that no amount of chemicals could fully mask. 2 of the 4 fluorescent lights overhead flickered in that erratic pattern that always makes me think of horror movies, and I actually laughed a little at myself for the thought. Brooke took the first stall while I went to the sink to splash cold water on my face. The mirror above the basin was scratched and clouded, and my reflection looked like a ghost of myself, pale and hollow-eyed. I cupped the water in my hands and pressed it against my cheeks, my forehead, the back of my neck. It helped a little. Brooke finished and came to wash her hands beside me, and we exchanged that silent look sisters share when neither wants to admit they feel uneasy. We dried our hands on paper towels that felt more like sandpaper and headed back toward the exit. That is when I heard it, an engine turning over, low and rumbling coming from somewhere in the parking lot. I pushed the door open and stepped outside, and the black SUV that had been parked at the far end of the lot was now moving. Slowly, deliberately, it rolled across the empty spaces toward our car. Brooke grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging into my skin hard enough to leave marks. We stood frozen in the doorway of the restroom, watching as the SUV crept forward with its headlights off. Just this massive black shape gliding through the darkness like a predator. It stopped directly behind our Camry, positioning itself so that its front bumper nearly touched our rear. The angle was precise, calculated, blocking our only clear path to the exit lane. My mind raced through explanations. Maybe the driver was just repositioning. Maybe they wanted to use the bathroom and preferred parking closer to the building. But nobody got out. The engine kept running, a low idle that seemed to pulse through the humid air. I could feel it more than hear it, this vibration that settled into my chest. Brooke whispered my name, just barely, and her voice cracked on the second syllable. I did not look at her because I could not take my eyes off that SUV, waiting for a door to open, for some explanation that would make this make sense. We started walking toward our car, trying to keep our pace normal, like nothing was wrong. My keys were already in my hand, and I pressed the unlock button twice, watching the Camry's lights flash in response. 20 feet felt like 100. The SUV just sat there, engine humming, windows so dark I could not see even the outline of a person inside. We reached our car, and I yanked the driver door open, practically throwing myself into the seat while Brooke scrambled in beside me. The second her door closed, I hit the lock button and jammed the key into the ignition. That is when someone knocked on my window. The sound was sharp, deliberate, knuckles against glass, and I jerked so hard my knee slammed into the steering column. A man stood beside my door, appearing from nowhere, or maybe he had been crouched beside the SUV the whole time. He was tall, wearing a dark hoodie despite the heat, and his face was partially obscured by the shadow of his hood. He knocked again, softer this time, and then he spoke through the glass. His voice was muffled, but I could make out the words. He said his car would not start, said he needed a jump, asked if we had cables. Everything about this was wrong, and I knew it. His car was clearly running, the engine still rumbling behind us, blocking our exit. I shook my head through the window without rolling it down, mouthing the word, sorry, pretending I did not understand. The man tilted his head slightly, and even though I could not see his eyes clearly, I felt them on me. He knocked again, harder this time, and pointed toward the SUV with his other hand, gesturing for me to get out. Brooke had her phone in her hand, trying to call someone, anyone, but I could see the screen from the corner of my eye. No signal, not even one bar. These rural stretches of Kentucky were notorious for dead zones, and we had driven straight into one. The man kept talking, his voice rising just enough to sound insistent, and then I saw movement in my side mirror. Another figure, shorter but broader, walking around the back of our car from the passenger side. He moved slowly, casually, like someone out for an evening stroll, but his path was deliberate. He was circling, positioning himself at Brooke's door. I turned the key and the engine came to life, and I have never been more grateful for a sound in my entire life. The man at my window stepped back just slightly, surprised maybe, or recalculating. I threw the car into reverse without thinking, my foot pressing the gas before my brain fully processed what I was doing. The Camry lurched backward, and I heard the sickening crunch of plastic and metal as my bumper connected with the SUV behind us. But I did not stop. I kept reversing, turning the wheel hard, trying to angle around the massive vehicle blocking our path. The SUV moved with us. Whoever was inside matched my movements, inching backward as I reversed, keeping that gap closed. It was like they had done this before, like they knew exactly how to trap a smaller car in a parking lot with no witnesses. The man at my window started jogging alongside us, slapping his palm against the glass, and his voice changed. Gone was the pretense of needing help. He was yelling now, demanding we stop, using words I will not repeat. Brooke was screaming beside me, telling me to go, just go. And I was trying, God, I was trying. But there was nowhere to go. Then headlights appeared on the highway. A pair of them, bright and distant, coming from the direction we had arrived. I saw them through the trees first, flickering between the branches, and then they swung onto the exit ramp leading into the rest stop. The reaction was immediate. The man at my window stopped slapping the glass and turned toward the approaching vehicle. The SUV behind us suddenly lurched backward, creating a gap it had refused to give us seconds before. I did not hesitate. I slammed the car into drive and floored the accelerator, aiming for that narrow opening between the SUV and the concrete barrier marking the edge of the parking lot. The Camry scraped against something. I heard metal shrieking against metal, but I did not care. We shot forward, and I yanked the wheel toward the exit lane just as a semi-truck pulled into the rest stop, its air brakes hissing as it slowed down. The driver must have seen us tearing out of there because his horn blasted, long and deafening, echoing across the empty lot. In my rearview mirror, I saw the SUV reversing rapidly toward the tree line, pulling back into the shadows where it had been waiting when we first arrived. We did not stop until we reached the next town, a tiny cluster of buildings called Greenville or Greenfield, something like that, about 20 miles down the highway. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, the kind with neon signs and truckers eating pie at the counter, and I put the car in park and just sat there. My entire body was shaking, this uncontrollable tremor that started in my legs and worked its way up through my chest and into my jaw. Brooke was crying silently beside me, tears streaming down her face while she clutched her phone like a lifeline. Neither of us spoke for what felt like 10 minutes. Finally, she looked at me and asked if that had really just happened, and I did not know how to answer her. The back of our car was destroyed, the bumper hanging off at an angle and deep scratches gouged into the trunk where we had scraped past the SUV. That was real. That was proof. We had not imagined anything. I wanted to call the police, but I did not even know where to begin. What would I say? 2 men in an SUV scared us at a rest stop? They never touched us. They never explicitly threatened us. All they did was ask for a jump and block our car. But we both knew what would have happened if that truck had not shown up when it did. We ended up calling the police from the diner after the waitress let us use their landline. A deputy showed up about 40 minutes later, a tired-looking man named Gentry, who listened to our story with the kind of expression that told me he had heard something like this before. He took notes, asked us to describe the SUV and the men as best we could, and told us he would file a report. When I asked if there had been other incidents at that rest stop, he paused for a moment before answering. He said there had been complaints, vague things, travelers reporting feeling unsafe or seeing suspicious vehicles, but nothing concrete, no arrests, no victims who stuck around long enough to press charges. He told us we were smart to keep our doors locked, smart to run when we did. The way he said it made me feel sick, like he was congratulating us on surviving something that should not happen in the first place. Before he left, he mentioned that the state had been talking about closing that rest stop for years due to budget cuts, that there was no staff after dark and no security cameras. Places like that attract a certain kind of person, he said. I think about those words more than I should. Brooke and I made it to Nashville the next morning, driving straight through the night because neither of us could stomach the thought of stopping again. We told our mom a shortened version of what happened, enough to explain why her 2 daughters showed up looking like they had not slept in days. She cried and held us, and made us promise to never travel that stretch of highway again after dark. I kept that promise for almost 2 years before work forced me to make a similar drive. That time I booked a hotel room halfway and paid extra for one near a police station. Some people might read this and think we overreacted, that maybe those men really did need help, and we just panicked. But I remember the way the SUV moved with us, inch by inch, refusing to let us leave. I remember the coordination between the man at my window and the one circling behind. I remember how fast they retreated the moment witnesses arrived. That was not a misunderstanding. That was a trap, practiced and patient, waiting in the dark for someone tired enough to stop. We were almost the ones who did not drive away. Every time I pass a rest stop now, even in broad daylight, I keep driving. I would rather run out of gas on the shoulder than pull into one of those places ever again. Friday nights usually meant overtime at the warehouse, and that November in 2014 was no different. My graduating class from high school back in 2005 had scattered across the country chasing careers and families, but I stayed in rural Ohio, working logistics for a distribution company outside of Columbus. The pay was decent, the hours were brutal during peak season, and by the time my shift ended at 2 in the morning, the roads between the warehouse and my apartment were completely deserted. I preferred it that way. No traffic, no headlights in my mirrors, just me and the hum of my old Ford pickup cutting through the darkness. That particular Friday had been exhausting. 14 hours of loading trucks and dealing with a computer system that kept crashing every 20 minutes. All I wanted was to get home, crack open a beer, and pass out on my couch with some late-night television droning in the background. I took my usual route, avoiding the interstate and sticking to the state highways that wound through farmland and patches of forest. The roads were empty, as expected, and a light fog had started creeping across the pavement in thin wisps. My headlights carved tunnels through the mist, illuminating nothing but asphalt and the occasional reflective mile marker. I had the radio tuned to some AM station playing old country songs, the kind my father used to listen to when I was a kid riding shotgun in his truck. Somewhere around mile marker 47, I decided to take a shortcut through an exit ramp that connected to a county road. It shaved about 10 minutes off my commute, and at that hour, every minute counted. I slowed down as I approached the curve of the ramp, my headlights sweeping across the guardrail and the tall grass beyond it. And that is when I saw something that made me ease off the gas pedal completely, my foot hovering over the brake as my brain struggled to process what my eyes were showing me. A baby car seat, right there in the middle of the exit ramp, sitting upright on the cracked asphalt like someone had placed it there with purpose. It was one of those infant carriers with the curved bottom and the handle arched over the top, the kind you see parents lugging around grocery stores and parking lots. The fabric looked pale in my headlights, maybe gray, maybe light blue, and there was a small blanket draped over it, partially covering whatever might be inside. I brought my truck to a complete stop about 30 feet away, my engine idling rough in the cold air. My first thought was that someone had been in an accident, that a car had gone off the road and I just could not see it from this angle. But there were no skid marks, no broken glass, no debris scattered across the pavement. The guardrail was intact. There was nothing, no vehicle, no person, no indication of how that car seat had ended up in the middle of a deserted exit ramp at 2:30 in the morning. I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, staring at that seat through my windshield, and every instinct in my body started screaming at me in two different directions. Part of me wanted to throw the truck in park, run out there and check if there was actually a baby inside that carrier. Because if there was, if some infant had been abandoned out here in the freezing November night, I could not just drive away. That is not the kind of person I am. But another part of me, a deeper and more primal part, was telling me that something about this whole situation was wrong. The placement was too deliberate. The exit ramp was too remote. I looked around, scanning the darkness beyond my headlights, and that is when I noticed the embankment on the right side of the road. Tall grass, dead and brown from the autumn frost, stretched up a slight hill toward a tree line about 50 yards away. And in that grass, barely visible in the ambient glow from my truck, I saw movement. Just a subtle shift, like someone or something adjusting their position. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. I did not move. I just sat there, engine running, headlights pointed straight at that car seat, and I watched. The movement in the grass had stopped, but now that I knew where to look, I could make out a shape crouched low among the weeds. It was definitely a person. I could see the outline of shoulders, the curve of a head ducked down like they were trying to stay hidden. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I thought about honking my horn, about rolling down my window and yelling out to ask if someone needed help, but something kept me from doing it. Instead, I reached over to the passenger seat where I kept a heavy flashlight, one of those metal ones that took 4D batteries and could double as a weapon if needed. I grabbed it and pointed it toward the embankment without turning it on, just holding it, feeling its weight in my hand. The figure in the grass still was not moving. Whoever it was, they were waiting for me to get out of my truck. That realization hit me like a punch to the chest. This was a trap. The car seat, the empty road, the complete absence of any other vehicle or explanation. It was all designed to make someone stop, to make someone get out. I had heard stories like this before, urban legends passed around at work or shared on the internet. Tales of criminals using fake emergencies to lure good Samaritans into vulnerable positions. Carjackings, robberies, worse. I always figured those stories were exaggerated, the kind of paranoid warnings that bored people spread around to scare each other. But sitting there on that exit ramp, staring at a baby seat that had no business being there while a stranger hid in the brush 20 feet away, those stories did not feel like legends anymore. I slowly moved my foot from the brake to the gas pedal, keeping my eyes locked on the embankment. And then I saw a second shape rise slightly from the grass, further up the hill, closer to the tree line. There were at least two of them out there. My mouth went dry. I pressed the gas pedal gently, just enough to start rolling forward, and I angled my truck to go around the car seat on the left side where there was a gap between the carrier and the guardrail. I did not want to run it over. Some irrational part of my brain still wondered if there might actually be an infant inside, even though logic was screaming at me that this was all staged. As my truck crept forward, the first figure in the grass suddenly stood up. It was a man, tall and lean, wearing dark clothes and something covering the lower half of his face, like a bandana or a gaiter pulled up to his nose. He did not run toward me, did not yell, did not do anything dramatic. He just stood there and watched my truck roll past, his eyes catching the reflection of my headlights for just a second. That calm, patient stillness was more terrifying than if he had charged at my door. He looked like someone who had done this before, someone who knew that not every target would take the bait, and he was already calculating his next move. I cleared the car seat and punched the gas, my tires squealing against the cold pavement as I accelerated down the rest of the exit ramp. In my rearview mirror, I saw the second figure emerge fully from the tree line, shorter, stockier, moving quickly down the hill toward the road. The first man had turned to watch my truck disappear, and I could swear I saw him pull something from his pocket, maybe a phone, maybe something else. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached, and I did not slow down until I hit the county road and put at least 3 miles between me and that exit ramp. I was breathing hard, my chest heaving like I had just sprinted a mile, and the adrenaline was making my vision sharp and jittery at the same time. I kept checking my mirrors, expecting to see headlights appear behind me, expecting to hear the roar of an engine closing the distance. But the road stayed dark and empty, and after a few minutes, I started to believe that I had actually gotten away. I did not go home. The thought of leading anyone back to my apartment, even if I was not being followed, made my skin prickle with unease. Instead, I drove straight to a gas station about 8 miles down the road, one of those 24-hour places with bright fluorescent lights and security cameras mounted on every corner. I pulled into a parking spot right in front of the entrance, killed my engine, and just sat there for a while, trying to calm down. My legs felt weak, like they would not support me if I tried to stand. An older woman working the night shift inside glanced at me through the window, probably wondering why some guy in a beat-up pickup was just sitting in her parking lot at 3 in the morning. Eventually, I pulled out my phone and called 911. I told the dispatcher everything: the car seat, the figures in the grass, the location of the exit ramp. She asked me if I had seen any weapons, if anyone had approached my vehicle, if I could describe the individuals in more detail. I answered as best I could, my voice still shaky, and she told me that officers would be dispatched to check the area. She also told me something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. There had been 2 other reports that month from the same stretch of highway. One was a woman who had seen a similar setup on a different exit ramp about 5 miles north. A stroller that time, sitting in the middle of the road with a blanket draped over it. She had not stopped either, had driven straight to the nearest police station to report it. The other was a man who had actually pulled over to check on what he thought was an abandoned infant carrier. He had been jumped by 3 individuals before he even made it out of his car. Beaten badly, his wallet and phone stolen, his vehicle taken. The dispatcher said he had spent 4 days in the hospital with a fractured eye socket and broken ribs. She thanked me for reporting what I had seen and told me I had made the right choice by not stopping. I sat in that gas station parking lot for another hour after the call ended, watching every car that passed on the road, unable to shake the image of that tall man standing in the grass, watching me drive away with those calm, patient eyes. When I finally made it home that night, I locked every door and window in my apartment, wedged a chair under the front door handle, and sat on my couch with every light on until the sun came up. I did not sleep. I could not. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that car seat sitting in the beam of my headlights, so perfectly placed, so deliberately staged. I kept thinking about what would have happened if I had gotten out of my truck, if I had walked over to check on what I thought was an abandoned baby, my back turned to the embankment, completely vulnerable. Would they have hit me from behind before I even knew they were coming? Would I have ended up like that other man, broken and bleeding on the side of a road that nobody traveled at night? Or would it have been worse? The dispatcher had mentioned robberies and carjackings, but she had not said those were the only things that happened in cases like this. She had left a lot unsaid, and my imagination filled in the gaps with possibilities I did not want to consider. The police called me back 2 days later. A detective named Holloway told me they had found the car seat still on the exit ramp when officers arrived, but whoever had been hiding in the grass was long gone. They recovered footprints in the mud along the embankment, at least 3 distinct sets confirming there had been more people out there than I had even seen. The car seat itself was empty, just a prop, purchased secondhand according to a faded tag still attached to the handle. No fingerprints, no DNA, nothing that could identify who had set the trap. Holloway said they had increased patrols on that stretch of highway, but he was blunt with me. These kinds of operations were hard to catch because the people running them knew how to disappear fast. He told me I was lucky, that my instincts had probably saved my life that night. I thanked him and hung up, but the word lucky did not sit right with me. I did not feel lucky. I felt hunted. I changed my route to work after that, adding 20 extra minutes to my commute just to avoid that part of the highway. And even now, years later, I still slow down whenever I see something unexpected on the road at night. I still check the tree line, the ditches, the shadows beyond my headlights, because I know now that not every cry for help is real, and some traps are designed for people who just want to do the right thing. Nobody warns you about the silence. That particular kind of silence you only find on rural highways past midnight, where the road stretches like a black ribbon into nothing, and your headlights feel like the last source of light left in the world. I was driving from Portland to Boise that night, a 6-hour haul I had done maybe a dozen times before to visit my brother and his family. My daughter had just started kindergarten that fall, which meant I was officially part of that generation of adults who remember life before smartphones, but now cannot function without GPS. The clock on my dashboard read 1:47 in the morning, and I had been on the road since finishing my shift at the warehouse around 10. Coffee from a gas station 60 miles back was the only thing keeping my eyes open, and even that was starting to fail me. The man appeared in my headlights like a ghost rising from the asphalt. 1 second the road was empty, and the next, there he was, standing on the shoulder with his thumb out, and a large hiking backpack hanging from one shoulder. My first instinct was to keep driving, the way my father taught me, the way anyone with sense would do on a frozen highway in the middle of nowhere. But something made me slow down. Maybe it was the temperature gauge reading 19 degrees outside. Maybe it was the fact that I had not seen another car in over 40 minutes, and knew he could freeze to death before anyone else came along. Maybe I just remembered being 23 and broke, hitching rides myself between college and my parents' house during winter breaks. Whatever the reason, I pulled onto the gravel shoulder about 50 feet past him, watching in my rearview mirror as he jogged toward my car, his breath forming thick clouds in the frozen air. He climbed into the passenger seat with a quick nod of thanks, pulling the heavy backpack onto his lap instead of tossing it in the back. I noticed that immediately. The bag was army green, covered in patches and pins, stuffed so full that the zipper looked ready to burst. He was younger than I expected, maybe mid-20s, with a patchy beard that grew in uneven clumps across his jaw and cheeks. His eyes were pale blue, almost gray, and they darted around the interior of my car like he was cataloging every detail. He wore a brown corduroy jacket that was way too thin for this weather, and his fingernails were bitten down to raw pink crescents. The smell hit me next, not unwashed exactly, but something sharper underneath, like copper and sweat mixed together. I told him my name was Gary, asked where he was headed. He said east, just east, and that was good enough for now. His voice was flat, almost mechanical, like he was reading from a script he had memorized long ago. I pulled back onto the highway and tried to make small talk the way you do with strangers, asking about where he was coming from, what brought him out here in the middle of the night. He answered in fragments that never quite connected. Said he had been in Portland for a while, said he had business to handle. Said the buses stopped running when he needed them and that walking was fine until the temperature dropped. Every answer felt like a door closing rather than opening, so after a few minutes I stopped asking and let the silence fill the car. That was when he reached forward and turned off my radio without asking, killing the low hum of classic rock that had been my only company for the past 2 hours. The sudden quiet felt heavier than before, almost physical, pressing against my eardrums like a change in altitude. For about 20 miles neither of us spoke. I kept my eyes on the road, watching the white dashes disappear under my hood one after another, trying to calculate how long until the next town. My GPS showed a gas station in Huntington, still 43 miles ahead, and I started planning to stop there whether I needed fuel or not. Just to get out, breathe some fresh air, maybe give this guy a chance to find another ride. Then he laughed. Not at anything I said, not at anything on the road, just a sudden sharp burst of sound that came out of nowhere and stopped just as quickly. I glanced at him and he was staring straight ahead through the windshield, his lips moving slightly like he was having a conversation with someone I could not see. When he noticed me looking, he turned and smiled, and there was nothing behind that smile. No warmth, no humor, just teeth and stretched skin. He asked me if I believed in fate. I said I did not know. He said that was the wrong answer. The next 15 minutes were the longest of my life up until that point. He started talking, really talking, in this rapid stream of consciousness that jumped from topic to topic without any logic I could follow. He talked about a woman named Diane who had ruined his life, then about a dog he had as a kid that his father drowned in the bathtub, then about how the government was tracking people through cell phone towers and that was why he never carried one. His voice would shift from a whisper to nearly shouting and back again within the same sentence. At one point he punched the dashboard hard enough to make me flinch, then immediately apologized with that same empty smile and said he just got excited sometimes. I could feel my pulse hammering in my throat. Every instinct screamed at me to pull over and tell him to get out. But we were in the middle of absolute nowhere, no lights visible in any direction, and something told me that stopping the car right now would be a very bad idea. He wanted to know why I had picked him up. I told him the truth, that it was cold, and I did not want him to freeze. He considered this for a long moment, tilting his head like a bird examining something shiny, then said that was a weak reason. Said most people who stopped for strangers at night were either looking for something or running from something. Asked which one I was. I said neither, that I was just driving to see my brother. He made a sound in his throat, something between a grunt and a laugh, then unzipped his backpack about halfway. I tried not to look, but I could not help it. Inside I saw clothes bundled into tight rolls, a flashlight, what looked like a bundle of zip ties, and the handle of something metallic catching the glow from my dashboard lights. He noticed me noticing and zipped it back up slowly, deliberately, holding eye contact the whole time. His pale eyes never blinked. He said he liked to be prepared for anything, said you never knew what kind of people you might meet on the road at night. The GPS announced that Huntington was now 26 miles away. 26 miles had never sounded so far in my entire life. I adjusted my grip on the steering wheel and tried to keep my breathing steady, tried to act like I had not just seen what I saw. The man started asking about my route, why I was taking this highway instead of the interstate, whether I always drove this way. When I explained it was shorter and I knew the roads well, he shook his head and said I should take the next left, that he knew a faster way. There was no next left, not on this stretch. Nothing but empty fields and distant mountains for miles. I told him I would stick to my route, and his whole demeanor changed in an instant. The fake friendliness dropped away like a mask falling off, and underneath was something cold and rigid. He said he was not asking. His right hand drifted back toward the backpack on his lap, fingers brushing against the zipper. I have replayed the next few seconds in my head hundreds of times since that night, trying to understand how I managed to think so clearly when every cell in my body was screaming in pure terror. He unzipped the bag fully and pulled out a hunting knife with a serrated edge, the kind designed to gut deer, and held it casually against his thigh like it was the most natural thing in the world. He told me to stay calm, that nobody had to get hurt as long as I did exactly what he said. His voice had changed again, lower now, controlled, almost businesslike. He said there was a service road coming up in about 8 miles and I was going to take it. Said he had done this before and it always went smoother when people cooperated. I asked him what he wanted. Money, the car, anything he wanted he could have. He smiled again, that horrible empty smile, and said it was not about what he wanted. It was about what he needed. And what he needed was for me to stop asking questions and start driving where he told me to drive. My mind raced through every possible option. I could slam on the brakes, but he was already holding the knife and I would never get my seatbelt off before he reached me. I could try to crash the car, but at 70 miles per hour on a frozen road that was just as likely to kill me as him. I could try to fight, but he was younger and clearly prepared for resistance. Then I remembered something my father told me once about defensive driving, about how the person behind the wheel always has more control than they realize. I started slowing down gradually, just a few miles per hour at a time, watching the speedometer drop from 70 to 65 to 60. He did not notice at first, too busy scanning the darkness ahead for his service road. By the time we hit 55, I spotted what I had been praying for since he pulled out that knife. Headlights in my rearview mirror, coming up fast, maybe half a mile back. Another car, the first one I had seen in over an hour. I made a decision right then that would either save my life or end it. I waited until the headlights were close enough that I could tell it was a truck, something big, 18 wheels maybe. Then I did 3 things in rapid succession. I slammed my hand down on the horn and held it there. I flicked my headlights from low to high beam over and over, and I started swerving across both lanes in a pattern that no sober driver would ever make. The man screamed at me to stop, lunging forward with the knife, but my swerving threw off his balance, and the blade caught the fabric of my jacket sleeve instead of my arm. The truck behind us responded exactly the way I hoped, laying on its own horn and flashing its lights, then pulling up alongside us in the oncoming lane. I could see the driver, a heavy-set man with a beard, his face twisted in confusion and concern as he tried to figure out what was happening. I pointed frantically at my passenger, mouthing the word help over and over, and I watched understanding dawn on the trucker's face. He grabbed something from his dashboard, a radio, and started talking into it while matching my speed. The man in my passenger seat went completely still, watching the truck with those pale, dead eyes, calculating his odds. Then he did something I did not expect. He started laughing, a high-pitched wheeze that sounded like air escaping from a punctured tire. He told me I was smarter than the others, said most people just did what they were told until it was too late. Then he reached over and pulled the door handle while we were still moving at 40 miles per hour. The door flew open, and the wind rushed in like a living thing, filling the car with noise and frozen air. He looked at me one last time, still smiling that terrible smile, and said he would remember my face. Then he tucked the knife back into his bag, clutched the backpack to his chest, and threw himself out of my moving car into the darkness beyond the shoulder. I slammed on the brakes so hard the anti-lock system screamed beneath my feet. The truck pulled over ahead of me and the driver came running back, asking if I was okay, saying he had already called the state police on his CB radio. I could not answer him. I just sat there behind the wheel, staring at the open passenger door swinging gently in the wind, my whole body shaking so hard I could hear my teeth rattling against each other. When the police arrived 20 minutes later, they searched the area for over an hour with flashlights and dogs. They found nothing. No footprints in the frozen grass, no blood, no sign that anyone had ever been there at all. The officer who took my statement said it was possible the man had a vehicle stashed nearby, that predators like that often planned escape routes in advance. He also told me that I was lucky, that 3 women had gone missing on this same stretch of highway over the past 2 years. They never found them. I made it to my brother's house by sunrise, and I have not driven that road at night ever again. Sometimes I still dream about those pale eyes watching me from the shoulder of some empty highway, thumb out, waiting for the next person kind enough to stop. Rural Kansas has a way of swallowing people whole, and I almost became one of its statistics on a Thursday night in early March of 2017. I had been driving for about 5 hours straight, heading back to Denver after a cousin's funeral in Topeka. One of those obligations where you barely knew the person, but your mom guilts you into showing up anyway. Everyone from my graduating class of 2012 was posting photos of their kids and promotions, while I sat in a church pew, pretending to remember a man I had met maybe 3 times in my entire life. The storm came out of nowhere, the way they do in that part of the country, turning the highway into a river, and the sky into something that looked almost solid. My windshield wipers were losing the battle, and every pair of headlights coming from the opposite direction felt like a threat. When the GPS suggested an alternate route to avoid reported flooding ahead, I took it without thinking twice. That was my first mistake. Exit 74 didn't even have a proper sign, just a metal post with reflectors that caught my headlights for half a second before I was already committed to the turn. The road narrowed immediately, going from 2 lanes to something that felt more like a wide hiking trail, the kind of path that made my Subaru's suspension groan in protest with every pothole. According to my phone, I was driving through a town called Ridgeback, and the screen showed neat little house icons lining both sides of the road like a normal residential area. But when I squinted through the rain, all I saw was darkness. No porch lights, no glowing windows, no signs of life whatsoever. I figured maybe everyone had lost power because of the storm, which would make sense given how violent the weather had become. The thunder was so loud it vibrated through my chest, and lightning would occasionally illuminate the landscape in brief, harsh flashes. In those moments of brightness, I caught glimpses of empty fields and shapes that might have been structures, but looked wrong somehow, too angular, too skeletal. The first mailbox I passed made me slow down. It was standing there at the edge of the road, rusted and crooked, with the name Pemberton barely visible in faded paint. My GPS showed a house icon right where the mailbox stood, but behind it there was nothing. Just an empty lot filled with overgrown weeds and what looked like the concrete outline of a foundation, cracked and broken like old bones poking through dead skin. I told myself the house must have been demolished recently, that maybe the GPS data was outdated. But then I passed another mailbox and another, and each one stood guard over the same emptiness. Lots where homes should have been, some with nothing but charred remains, others with just flat dirt and scattered debris. One of them still had a child's bicycle lying in the grass, its frame twisted and orange with rust, and I remember thinking that no kid had touched that thing in years. The rain kept hammering my windshield, and my phone kept insisting I was surrounded by civilization. I pulled over near what the GPS claimed was an intersection, though in reality, it was just a T-junction where the gravel met an even rougher dirt path. My signal had dropped to 1 bar, and the map was taking forever to reload. I needed to figure out where I was and how to get back to the highway, because nothing about this place matched what my screen was showing me. That's when I noticed something strange about the silence. The rain was still falling hard, the thunder still rolling in the distance, but underneath all that noise there was an absence. No dogs barking, no generators humming, no sounds of life at all. I looked around through my rain-streaked windows and realized I couldn't see a single light anywhere. Not a farmhouse in the distance, not a radio tower blinking red. Nothing. Just absolute darkness pressing against my car from all sides like deep water. I reached for my phone to call someone, anyone, but the call wouldn't connect. The screen just showed that spinning circle that means your phone is trying and failing to reach the outside world. Headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. At first, I felt relief. Another car meant another person, someone who knew these roads and could point me back toward the highway. The lights were far away, maybe half a mile, but they were getting closer. I watched them bounce and sway as the vehicle navigated the same terrible road I had just traveled, and I remember thinking I should flash my hazards to get their attention. But something made me hesitate. The car wasn't moving like someone just passing through. It was moving slowly, deliberately, like it was searching for something. Then another set of headlights appeared, this time from the dirt path ahead of me, coming from the direction the GPS wanted me to go. Two vehicles approaching from opposite directions, both moving at that same strange crawling pace. My hand hovered over the gear shift, but I didn't know which way to run. The road behind me had those headlights blocking it, and the road ahead had the second car approaching. I was stuck at that T-junction like a mouse in a trap that had already snapped shut. The car behind me reached me first. It was a pickup truck, old and mud-caked, the kind of vehicle you see rusting in fields all across the Midwest. It stopped about 30 feet behind my Subaru, its headlights flooding my mirrors with harsh white light. I couldn't see the driver through the glare, just the silhouette of a figure sitting motionless behind the wheel. Then the car from ahead arrived, a dark sedan with a dented hood and no front license plate. It pulled up slowly and stopped about 20 feet in front of me, positioning itself at an angle that blocked any chance I had of squeezing past. For a long moment, nothing happened. The rain kept falling, the engines kept idling, and I sat there gripping my steering wheel so hard my knuckles went pale. Then, with a synchronization that felt rehearsed, both drivers opened their doors at the exact same time. I watched two figures step out into the rain, neither one making any move to approach me yet. They just stood there beside their vehicles, faces hidden in shadow, waiting for something I couldn't understand. A third door opened. I hadn't even noticed there was a passenger in the sedan until a woman climbed out from the back seat. She was tall and thin, wearing a raincoat that hung off her frame like wet paper, and she was the first one to move toward me. Her walk was casual, unhurried, like she had all the time in the world. The two men, I could tell they were men now from their builds, stayed by their vehicles, watching. The woman stopped about 10 feet from my driver's side window and just stared at me through the rain. Lightning flashed, and for a split second I saw her face clearly. She looked ordinary, maybe in her 50s, with short gray hair plastered to her forehead and an expression that was completely blank. No anger, no threat, no emotion at all. That emptiness scared me more than anything else. She raised one hand slowly and made a cranking motion, telling me to roll down my window. I shook my head no and reached for my phone again, even though I knew it was useless. She watched me fumble with the device, and something close to amusement flickered across her face before it went blank again. The man from the pickup truck started walking toward me too. He was younger than the woman, maybe in his 30s, with broad shoulders and a thick beard that caught rainwater and held it. He positioned himself on the passenger side of my car, and now I had two people flanking me while the third man stayed by the sedan. My doors were locked. I had checked 3 times by this point, but that felt like such a pathetic defense against whatever was happening. The woman leaned closer to my window and said something I couldn't hear through the glass and the rain. I shook my head again, pointing at my ear like I didn't understand, which was true. She smiled then, just for a moment, and knocked on the glass with her knuckle. Not hard, not aggressive, just a polite little tap like she was visiting a neighbor. The bearded man mirrored her on the other side, tapping at the passenger window with the same casual rhythm. They were patient. They knew I had nowhere to go, and the way they looked at me through those rain-streaked windows made it clear they had done this before. I thought about my options while they stood there in the rain, watching me like I was a fish in a tank. I could try to ram one of the vehicles, but my Subaru wasn't built for that kind of impact, and their cars were positioned too precisely for me to get around them. I could honk my horn and hope someone heard, but there was no one to hear. That much was obvious. The woman knocked again, harder this time, and pointed at my door lock. The gesture was so matter-of-fact, like she was simply asking me to do something reasonable. The bearded man pulled something from his jacket, and in the flash of lightning, I saw it was a crowbar. He didn't raise it or threaten me with it. He just held it loosely at his side, letting me know it was there. That was when the reality of my situation hit me fully. These people weren't going to hurt me right away. They were going to wait. They would outlast me, drain my gas tank with the engine running, wait for my phone to die, wait for me to make a desperate move they could exploit. They had clearly done this enough times to know exactly how it went. Then I remembered something my dad had told me years ago, back when I was learning to drive. He was a paranoid man, my father. The kind of guy who kept a flashlight and a knife in every room of the house. He had made me promise that if I ever found myself in a situation where someone was trying to get me out of my car, I should never get out. But I should also never sit still. Movement was safety, stillness was death. My eyes flicked to the left side of the road, where the empty lot with the Pemberton mailbox sat in darkness. There was no fence, no barrier, just overgrown grass and mud. The pickup behind me was blocking the road, but it wasn't blocking that lot. If I could get my car across that patch of land, there might be a way around them. It was insane. My Subaru was all-wheel drive, sure, but it wasn't built for off-roading in a thunderstorm. But the alternative was sitting there until these people found a way inside. I made my decision in the span of a single heartbeat. I threw my car into drive and yanked the wheel hard to the left. The Subaru lurched forward and bounced off the gravel onto the muddy grass. I heard the woman shout something, the first real sound any of them had made. And in my rearview mirror, I saw her stumble back as my car swerved past her. The bearded man tried to grab at my door handle, but his fingers slipped on the wet metal, and then I was past him, tires spinning and throwing mud everywhere. The lot was rougher than I expected, full of hidden dips and debris buried under the weeds, and my car bucked like an animal trying to throw me off. I hit something hard, maybe a chunk of old foundation, maybe a rock, and my entire frame shuddered, but I kept my foot on the gas. The headlights from the pickup swung around as the driver realized what I was doing, but he was too slow. I cleared the lot and crashed through a line of dead bushes onto what looked like an old service road running parallel to the main path. I didn't know where it led. I didn't care. All that mattered was that I was moving, and they were behind me. I drove like a maniac for what felt like hours but was probably only 15 minutes. The service road connected to another gravel path, which connected to a slightly better road, which eventually, mercifully, brought me to a state highway with actual lane markings and working streetlights. I pulled into the first gas station I found, a little 24-hour place with bright fluorescent lights and a bored teenager behind the counter, and I sat in the parking lot crying for 10 minutes before I could make myself go inside. I bought a coffee I didn't drink, and asked the kid if he knew anything about Ridgeback. He looked at me like I was crazy and said he had never heard of it. I went back to my car and checked my phone, 4 bars of signal now, and searched for the town online. What I found made my hands go numb. Ridgeback had been a real place once, a small farming community that had dried up in the 80s when the local industry collapsed. Most of the residents had left, but a few families had stayed behind, becoming increasingly isolated, and, according to one old news article I found, increasingly hostile to outsiders. There had been disappearances, investigations that went nowhere, rumors about people who drove through and never came out the other side. I filed a police report the next morning at a station 2 counties over. The officer who took my statement was polite but skeptical, the way cops get when they think you're wasting their time. He said he would look into it, but the way he said it told me nothing would come of it. A few weeks later, I got a call from a detective who asked me to describe the vehicles and the people again. He told me there had been other reports over the years. Travelers who had gotten lost near Ridgeback during storms, who had encountered people on the roads who tried to get them to stop. Most of those travelers had not been as lucky as me. He thanked me for the information and said the investigation was ongoing, but I never heard from him again. That was 8 years ago. I still drive for work sometimes, crossing through Kansas and Nebraska and the empty places in between. But I never take shortcuts anymore. I never trust the GPS when it tells me there's a faster way, and whenever I see an exit with no proper sign, just a metal post with faded reflectors, I keep my eyes on the road ahead, and I do not slow down. Every December, my sister Carolyn insists on hosting Christmas at her place in Raleigh, and every December I tell myself I should just fly instead of making the 7-hour drive from my apartment in Baltimore. But flights during the holidays cost more than my monthly rent, and besides, I actually enjoy the solitude of a long night drive, or at least I used to. That particular Friday, I left work around 8 in the evening, later than I wanted because a server migration at the IT company where I work decided to crash right before I clocked out. By the time I merged onto I-85 heading south, most of the traffic had thinned out, leaving me alone with the hum of my tires on asphalt and a podcast about unsolved disappearances that seemed fitting for the dark stretch ahead. My graduating class from high school had their 10-year reunion that summer, which I skipped, but it reminded me that time moves faster than we expect. Fast enough that a routine drive to see family can become something else entirely without any warning. The first 2 hours passed without incident. I stopped once at a gas station somewhere past Richmond, grabbed a large coffee and a bag of peanuts, stretched my legs in the cold air, and got back on the road. Virginia's highways at night have this particular emptiness to them, especially once you get past the suburbs and strip malls. The trees crowd close to the shoulder, their bare branches reaching toward the road like skeletal fingers, and the only light comes from your own headlights carving a tunnel through the darkness. I had the heat cranked up, my coffee wedged in the cup holder, and I was half listening to a story about a hiker who vanished in the Cascades when I first noticed headlights appear in my rearview mirror. At that hour, seeing another car was almost comforting. Proof that I was not the only person awake in this corridor of nothing. I remember glancing at the clock on my dashboard, 11:47. I remember thinking the other driver was probably just as tired as me, just as eager to reach wherever they were going. I had no idea that those headlights would become the only thing I could think about for the next 3 hours. At first, I did not pay much attention. Cars follow other cars on highways, that is how roads work. But after about 10 minutes, I noticed the headlights were unusually bright, the kind of aggressive high beams that people forget to switch off when they approach other vehicles. The light flooded my rearview mirror and bounced off my side mirrors, creating this blinding halo effect that made it difficult to see anything behind me, except white glare. I tilted my rearview mirror down to reduce the reflection, a trick my father taught me when I first learned to drive. That helped a little, but I could still feel the intensity of the light pressing against the back of my head, washing out everything in my peripheral vision. I figured the driver was either oblivious or inconsiderate, the type of person who cruises in the left lane with their high beams on, because they simply do not care about anyone else. I sped up slightly, hoping to put some distance between us and signal that they were too close. The car behind me sped up too. I eased off the gas, dropping from 75 to 65. The headlights maintained the exact same distance, close enough to swallow my entire rear window in light. That was when a small knot began to form in my chest. I told myself I was being paranoid, that highway driving at night can play tricks on your perception, that distances are hard to judge when the only reference points are your own headlights and the reflective lane markers blurring past. I switched lanes, moving from the left to the right, expecting the car to blow past me and disappear into the darkness ahead. It did not. The headlights drifted smoothly into my lane, settling back into position directly behind me like a magnet snapping into place. I could not make out the shape of the vehicle through the glare, just those two burning white eyes fixed on my mirror. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. I turned off the podcast because suddenly the story about the missing hiker did not seem entertaining anymore. The silence in the car felt heavy, interrupted only by the drone of my engine and the rhythmic thump of tires crossing expansion joints in the pavement. I watched the mile markers crawl past. 147, 146, 145. The headlights never wavered, never fell back, never surged forward to pass. They just stayed there, locked onto me like I was the only thing on this road that mattered. I decided to test my theory. An exit sign appeared ahead. Exit 142, some town I had never heard of called Bracy. I flicked on my turn signal, watching the mirror carefully for any reaction. The car behind me did nothing. No signal, no movement to pass, just that unwavering wall of light. I began to merge toward the exit ramp, slowing down as the lane curved away from the interstate. For a moment, I felt relief wash through me. The headlights were continuing straight, staying on I-85, and I was about to prove to myself that I had been acting like a paranoid fool who had watched too many true crime documentaries. Then, at the last possible second, the car swerved onto the exit ramp behind me. No turn signal, no gradual merge, just a sharp cut across the painted lines that made my heart lurch into my throat. The tires on the other vehicle actually squealed against the asphalt. Whoever was driving had made a split-second decision to follow me, and they had done it with the kind of aggressive precision that left no room for coincidence. I was no longer on a highway with other potential witnesses. I was on a dark two-lane road heading into rural Virginia, and the only other person out here had just made it very clear that wherever I went, they intended to go too. The road into Bracy was narrow and poorly lit, flanked by pine trees that blocked out whatever moonlight might have helped me see. My headlights caught glimpses of barbed wire fences and the occasional mailbox, but no houses close enough to the road for me to pull into a driveway and honk until someone came out. The car behind me had closed the distance. On the highway, they had maintained maybe 4 or 5 car lengths between us. Now it was 2 at most, close enough that the glare completely whited out my rearview mirror. I could feel the heat of their headlights on the back of my neck, or maybe I was imagining it, but the sensation was real enough to make me hunch forward in my seat. I fumbled for my phone with one hand, keeping my eyes locked on the winding road ahead. The screen lit up and I saw what I had been dreading. 1 bar of signal, flickering in and out like a dying heartbeat. I tried to call 911 anyway. The call failed before it even connected. I tried again, pressing the phone against my ear so hard it hurt. Nothing, just dead air and the glow of no service replacing my hope. The car behind me honked once, a long, sustained blast that echoed through the empty countryside like a warning shot. I pressed the accelerator harder, pushing my old Subaru Forester past 50 on a road that was probably meant for 35. The engine groaned in protest, but the speedometer climbed. 55. 60. The trees blurred into dark walls on either side of me, and I gripped the wheel with both hands, terrified of missing a curve and wrapping myself around a telephone pole. Behind me, the other car matched my speed effortlessly. When I accelerated, they accelerated. When I took a curve too fast and had to brake, they braked at the exact same moment, maintaining that suffocating distance like we were connected by an invisible tow cable. I started talking to myself out loud, something I do when I am scared and need to hear a human voice even if it is my own. Okay, think. There has to be a gas station, a store, something open. Just find lights, find people. But Bracy at midnight was a ghost town. The few buildings I passed were shuttered and dark. A closed hardware store, an abandoned feed supply warehouse, a church with no cars in the parking lot. I was alone with whoever was behind me, and they knew it. Then the road curved sharply to the left, and I saw a faint glow ahead, a fluorescent sign buzzing against the darkness. It was a small convenience store, the kind that sells cigarettes and lottery tickets and stays open late for truckers passing through. The parking lot was empty, except for one pickup truck near the entrance, probably belonging to whoever was working the register. I did not slow down to think about whether this was a good idea. I just yanked the wheel to the right and skidded into the parking lot, my tires spraying gravel as I came to a stop directly in front of the glass doors. I expected the car behind me to follow, to pull in beside me and reveal whoever had been hunting me for the past half hour. Instead, something worse happened. The car slowed as it approached the parking lot entrance, and for the first time, I got a partial look at it through my driver's side window. A dark pickup truck, maybe black or dark blue, with a lifted suspension and some kind of metal guard on the front bumper. It did not pull in, it just stopped at the edge of the lot, headlights still blazing, engine idling, waiting, watching. The driver did not get out, did not honk, did not do anything except sit there like a predator who had cornered its prey and was deciding what to do next. I threw open my door and ran inside the store, nearly tripping over my own feet as I pushed through the glass entrance. A bell chimed overhead, absurdly cheerful given the circumstances. The man behind the counter looked up from his phone with the tired expression of someone who had seen too many late-night weirdos to be surprised by anything. He was maybe 60 years old, with a gray beard that needed trimming and a faded camouflage jacket that suggested he spent his free time hunting deer rather than dealing with panicked strangers. "Someone is following me," I said, and my voice came out higher and faster than I intended. "There is a truck outside in the parking lot entrance. He has been chasing me since the highway. I need to call the police." The man, his name tag said Earl, leaned sideways to peer through the window behind me. His expression shifted from boredom to something harder, more alert. "Dark truck, lifted, got a brush guard on the front?" I nodded, unable to speak. Earl reached under the counter and pulled out a cordless phone, punching in numbers with practiced ease. "Yeah, this is Earl over at the quick stop on Route 58. Got a situation here. Some fella being chased by a truck. Vehicle is sitting at the edge of my lot right now, headlights on." He listened for a moment, then nodded. "Will do." Earl hung up and looked at me with an expression that was difficult to read, part concern, part something else I could not identify. "Sheriff's deputy is about 15 minutes out. Only one on duty tonight covering the whole county. You stay inside. Keep away from the windows." I moved toward the back of the store, positioning myself behind a shelf of motor oil and windshield wiper fluid, where I could still see the entrance but would not be visible from outside. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. Through the dusty glass, I watched the truck sitting at the edge of the parking lot, its headlights cutting two bright tunnels through the darkness. Minutes passed. 5, 10. Earl stayed behind his counter, occasionally glancing at the window, one hand resting near something under the register that I suspected was not a calculator. Neither of us spoke. The silence was broken only by the hum of the refrigerator cases and the distant ticking of a clock I could not see. Then, without warning, the truck's headlights flicked off. The engine revved once, a deep guttural sound that echoed across the empty lot, and the vehicle reversed slowly, deliberately, back onto Route 58. I watched its taillights disappear around a curve, swallowed by the night. But I did not feel relief. Whoever had been driving that truck had not given up. They had simply decided that tonight was not the night, that pursuing me further with a witness present and police on the way was not worth the risk. They had made a calculation, and that terrified me more than anything else. The deputy arrived 20 minutes later, a young woman named Faulkner with short brown hair and a no-nonsense demeanor that made me feel slightly safer just standing near her. I gave my statement twice, describing everything from the moment I first noticed the headlights on I-85 to the truck's deliberate retreat. She wrote it all down in a small notebook, asking clarifying questions without any hint of skepticism, which I appreciated more than I could express. When I finished, she closed the notebook and looked at me directly. "You are not the first person to report something like this on that stretch of highway," she said, and those words landed like a punch to the chest. We have had 3 or 4 similar incidents over the past 2 years. Always late at night, always a lone driver, always that same general description of the vehicle. Dark pickup, lifted brush guard. We have never been able to identify the driver or catch them in the act. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. My advice? Do not drive that route alone at night anymore. Take the longer way through Durham next time, even if it adds an hour. And if you ever see those headlights again, do exactly what you did tonight. Find people, find lights, and call us immediately. I nodded, feeling numb. The idea that someone was out there, repeatedly doing this, picking off lone drivers like a sport, made me want to never get behind the wheel again. Earl let me stay at the store until I felt steady enough to drive. I called my sister around 2 in the morning, waking her up to explain why I would be arriving much later than planned. Carolyn wanted me to wait until daylight to finish the trip, but I could not stomach the thought of sitting in that parking lot for another 5 hours, jumping at every set of headlights that passed on the road outside. Deputy Faulkner offered to escort me back to I-85, and I accepted without hesitation. She followed me in her cruiser for about 30 miles, her presence a comforting glow in my rearview mirror, until she finally flashed her lights once and took an exit back toward Bracy. The rest of the drive to Raleigh was uneventful, but I kept my speed at exactly the limit, my eyes constantly flicking between the road ahead and the mirror behind me. I arrived at my sister's house just after 4 in the morning, exhausted and shaken in a way that coffee and sleep would not fix. That Christmas was subdued. I told Carolyn the whole story, and she made me promise to fly next year no matter what the tickets cost. I agreed. Some savings are not worth the price you might pay for them. February in Virginia means unpredictable weather, and that Sunday evening in 2017 had been deceptively calm when I left my friend Nora's place outside Raleigh. She had just had her first baby, a wrinkly little boy named Oliver who gripped my finger like his life depended on it. 4 days of holding him, helping with midnight feedings and pretending to enjoy her husband's overcooked pasta, had been the perfect escape from my cubicle life at the insurance office. My high school class graduated in 2009, and most of us were hitting that stage where babies and mortgages replaced bar nights and road trips. I had neither, just a used silver Nissan Altima, a cramped apartment, and a boss who expected me at my desk by 8 Monday morning. So I hit the road around 8 that night, a 6-hour drive ahead of me, trunk loaded with baby clothes Nora insisted I take for some future child I had no plans of having. The highway stretched out dark and familiar, a route I had driven dozens of times before. 3 hours in, somewhere past the North Carolina border, the world outside my windshield turned into pure blackness. No streetlights, no passing cars, no glowing signs of late-night diners or gas stations. Just my headlights cutting a narrow path through nothing. The moon had disappeared behind a thick layer of clouds, and the kind of darkness that surrounded me felt almost physical, like something pressing against the windows. My phone had lost signal about 20 minutes back, but that was normal for this stretch. It always came back near the next town. I was scanning through radio stations, catching bits of static and twangy country songs, when the steering wheel tugged hard to the right. Then came that awful sound, the rhythmic thump-thump-thump that meant only one thing. I gripped the wheel tighter and guided the limping car toward the shoulder, gravel crunching under the tires as I slowed to a stop. The dashboard clock read 11:47, and I sat there for a moment in the sudden silence, my headlights illuminating nothing but empty road and scraggly trees. I popped the trunk and stepped out into the cold, immediately regretting that I had left my heavier jacket at Nora's. The air had that raw February bite, the kind that sneaks through fabric and settles into your bones. I walked to the back of the car, the crunch of gravel under my sneakers impossibly loud in the silence, and stared at the rear passenger tire. Completely deflated, the rim almost touching the ground. I had changed a tire exactly once in my life during a driver's ed class in high school, but I remembered the basics. Spare tire jack, lug wrench. I was pulling the spare from the trunk when I noticed headlights in the distance behind me, 2 small dots growing slowly larger. Out here, another car felt almost miraculous. I watched as the vehicle approached, expecting it to pass by, maybe slow down to see if I was okay. Instead, it pulled onto the shoulder about 30 feet behind my Altima, headlights blazing directly at me, and stopped. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The car just sat there, engine running, high beams washing everything in harsh white light that made me squint. Then the driver's door opened and a figure stepped out. A man, tall and lanky, wearing a dark jacket and jeans. He walked toward me with a pace that felt deliberate, not quite hurried but purposeful, his face obscured by the glare behind him. "Car trouble?" he called out when he was about 15 feet away, his voice friendly enough but cutting through the silence in a way that made my shoulders tense. I nodded, holding the spare tire like some kind of pathetic shield. "Flat tire," I said, trying to keep my voice steady and casual. "I got it though, thanks for stopping." He kept walking closer, and as he moved out of the direct beam of his headlights, I could finally see his face. Maybe mid-40s, stubbled jaw, deep-set eyes that caught the light strangely. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that seemed practiced, like something he had learned to do rather than felt. "Nonsense," he said, already reaching for the spare tire in my hands. "A lady shouldn't have to do this alone out here. Let me help." I did not want his help. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to get back in my car, lock the doors, and wait for literally anyone else to come along. But there is this thing that happens to women, this awful programming that society drills into us, where we prioritize being polite over being safe. I did not want to seem rude, paranoid, or ungrateful. So I let him take the spare, let him crouch down by the flat tire, let him position the jack underneath the frame, even though his movements seemed oddly slow, like he was stretching the task on purpose. "Name's Gene," he said without looking up. "You picked a bad spot to break down. Nothing for miles out here." I told him my name was Michelle, which was a lie. My real name is Courtney, and thanked him again for stopping. He glanced up at me then, those deep-set eyes reflecting my taillights, and asked where I was headed. Something about the question felt wrong, too personal, but I mumbled something about visiting family up north. He nodded slowly, a small smile playing at his lips. "Long drive," he said, "all by yourself." The way he said it made the hair on my arm stand up despite the cold already doing that. I took a step back toward my driver's door, wanting to be closer to the interior of my car, to my purse where my useless phone sat, to anything familiar. Gene noticed. He stood up abruptly, abandoning the jack, and took a step that put him directly between me and my door. "Where are you going?" he asked, and his voice had shifted, still friendly on the surface but with something underneath, like a dog growling with its tail still wagging. "I just need to grab my flashlight," I said, the lie coming out shaky. He tilted his head, studying me in a way that felt like being dissected. "Headlights are bright enough," he said. "Why don't you come around here and hold this for me? Need someone to keep the lug nuts organized." He gestured toward the back of my car, toward the darkness beyond the reach of either vehicle's lights. I did not move. My legs felt rooted to the gravel, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Gene's smile faded slowly, like a mask slipping off, and for a long, horrible moment we just stood there staring at each other in the middle of nowhere. Then headlights appeared in the distance, coming from the opposite direction. Gene's head snapped toward them, and in that split second of distraction, I moved. I lunged for my car door, yanked it open, and threw myself inside, slamming it shut and hitting the lock button with my elbow. Gene was at the window immediately, his palm flat against the glass, that fake friendliness gone entirely now. His face had transformed into something cold and flat, his eyes empty in a way that made my whole body go rigid. "Open the door, Michelle," he said, using the fake name I had given him, his voice low and even. "You're being dramatic. I'm just trying to help you." I was fumbling for my keys, which I had stupidly left in the ignition, my fingers clumsy and uncooperative. The approaching car was getting closer, maybe a quarter mile away now. Gene looked at it, then back at me, and what I saw in his expression was calculation, pure rational evaluation of his options. He slapped the window once, hard enough to make me flinch, then stepped back. He walked to my trunk, still open, and grabbed something. I could not see what from my angle. Then he moved to my rear tire, the one he had supposedly been fixing, and did something quick with his hands. I heard a metallic clang, the sound of the jack collapsing. He walked back toward his own car with an unhurried pace, like a man finishing a casual errand, and as he passed my window, he leaned down and looked directly at me. "See you down the road," he said, and I will never forget the way his mouth curved when he said it. Not a smile exactly, but something worse, something anticipatory. He got back in his car, a dark sedan I now noticed had no front license plate, and pulled back onto the highway heading the same direction I had been going. The other car passed by a few seconds later without slowing down, probably seeing nothing unusual about two vehicles on the shoulder. I sat there shaking, watching Gene's taillights disappear into the darkness ahead of me, realizing with growing horror that he was now somewhere on the road between me and home, waiting. I could not stay there, that much was clear. But I also could not drive forward on a destroyed tire, and going back the way I came meant hours of delay on unfamiliar roads with no cell signal. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. I forced myself to breathe, to think. The jack was useless now, Gene had made sure of that, but maybe I could still put on the spare and limp to the next town. I sat in the car for another 5 minutes, watching for any sign of his headlights returning, before I worked up the courage to step back outside. The cold hit me like a slap. I moved fast, grabbing the lug wrench and crouching by the ruined tire. Gene had loosened the lug nuts but never actually removed them, and the jack lay crumpled on its side like he had kicked it. I tried to make it work anyway, pumping the lever with desperate energy, but the thing was bent beyond function. That was when I noticed something that made my stomach turn to ice. The flat tire had not blown out from road damage or wear. There was a clean slit in the sidewall, about 3 inches long. Deliberate. Surgical. He had done this to me, probably at the last gas station where I had stopped, while I was inside paying for coffee. The realization hit me in waves. He had been following me for miles, maybe since Raleigh, waiting for me to pull over, waiting for the tire he had slashed to finally give out. This was not a chance encounter. This was a hunt, and I was the target. I abandoned the tire and got back in my car, locking the doors again, my mind racing through options. I could try driving on the rim, but that would be slow and loud, and Gene would hear me coming from a mile away. I could wait for another car to pass, but the last one had not even slowed down, and who knew when the next would come. Then I remembered something. About 2 miles back, I had passed a small gravel turnoff with a metal gate, and what looked like a farmhouse in the distance. Lights had been on. Someone was home. It was risky, walking 2 miles alone in the dark on a road where a predator might be circling back, but staying here felt like sitting in a trap waiting to be sprung. I grabbed my phone, useless as it was, and the small canister of pepper spray I kept in my glove compartment. Then I turned off my headlights, plunging myself into complete darkness, and slipped out of the car as quietly as I could. Walking along the edge of that highway was the longest 20 minutes of my life. I stayed off the pavement, moving through the rough grass and gravel on the shoulder, my eyes slowly adjusting to the darkness until I could make out the faint shapes of trees and fence posts. Every sound made me want to scream. The rustle of wind through dead leaves, the distant call of some night bird, the crunch of my own footsteps that seemed impossibly loud. Twice I saw headlights in the distance and threw myself flat into the ditch beside the road, pressing my face into cold mud and dead weeds, my heart slamming against my ribs. The first car passed without incident, heading the opposite direction. The second one came from behind me, moving slowly, and I recognized the shape of it even before I could make out details. The dark sedan with no front plate. Gene was circling back. I lay there in the ditch, not breathing, as his headlights swept over the spot where I had been walking seconds before. He was going maybe 10 miles an hour, searching. I could hear the low rumble of his engine as he crept past, and I squeezed the pepper spray so tight I thought it might crack in my grip. He continued on toward my abandoned car, and I did not wait to see what he would do when he found it empty. I ran. Not on the road, but through the fields beside it, stumbling over uneven ground, tripping on roots and rocks I could not see. The farmhouse appeared as a faint yellow glow in the distance, and I fixed my eyes on it like a lighthouse. My lungs burned and my legs ached, but I did not stop, not even when I heard a car engine revving somewhere behind me. Not even when I tore my jacket on a barbed wire fence I barely saw in time to climb instead of run into. I reached the farmhouse porch and pounded on the door with both fists, gasping, probably looking absolutely insane. An older man answered, maybe 65, wearing a flannel robe and an expression of total bewilderment. I told him someone was following me, that I needed to call 911, and something in my face must have convinced him, because he pulled me inside without a single question and locked the door behind me. His wife appeared from the kitchen holding a phone, already dialing. Through the window I saw headlights slow down on the main road near the gravel turnoff, pause for a long moment, and then accelerate away into the night. The police came within 15 minutes. The couple, Bernard and June Whitfield, stayed with me the entire time. June pressing a mug of hot tea into my hands that I could not drink because my whole body was still trembling. Officers found my car where I had left it, trunk open, tire slashed, the sabotaged jack still lying on the ground. They took pictures, took my statement, and exchanged glances that told me this was not the first time they had heard something like this. A detective called me 2 days later with news that made me sick to my stomach. The dark sedan had been found abandoned in a motel parking lot about 40 miles north, wiped clean of prints. It had been reported stolen 3 weeks earlier from a dealership in South Carolina. There was no Gene, at least not by that name, and no way to trace him. But here is the part that haunts me. The part I think about every time I drive alone at night. The detective told me they had pulled security footage from the gas station where I had stopped for coffee, the last place before my tire went flat. The footage showed a man matching my description walking calmly to my car while I was inside, crouching by the rear tire for less than 30 seconds, then returning to a dark sedan parked on the far side of the lot. He had been following me since Raleigh, maybe longer, and the detective said something I will never forget. He said in cases like this, when they catch the person, they almost always find out it was not the first time. Gene is still out there somewhere, and I know with absolute certainty that I was not his first, and I was not his last. I just happened to be the one who got away. The stretch of highway we'd been on for hours felt almost hypnotic, the kind of monotony that makes every conversation fade into background noise. I was driving my old sedan because it handled long trips better than either of my friends' cars, and we were trying to make it across 3 states in one weekend to visit another buddy who'd moved away. The sun had dipped low enough that the sky looked bruised, that in-between color where everything feels a little out of sync. I remember thinking how strange the evening felt, quiet in a way that made the world seem hollowed out. When the detour sign appeared up ahead, bright orange and angled slightly toward the shoulder, it didn't look suspicious at first. It matched the style of official signs I'd seen before, right down to the reflective striping. My friend Lucas leaned forward between the seats and tapped the dashboard. Yeah, makes sense. They were supposed to repave this section this month. That comment alone made the decision feel normal. I slowed down, clicked the blinker, and followed the arrow pointing us off the main road. The turn led us onto a thinner stretch of pavement lined with tall trees, thick enough that the branches tangled above us and dimmed what little light was left. My friend Haley joked that it felt like we were driving into a tunnel someone carved out with a pocket knife. She laughed afterward, but it was the kind of laugh that's too sharp, too quick, like she was trying to shoo away a thought she didn't want to sit with. The road after the first mile started to look neglected, a patchwork of faded paint lines and broken asphalt. No houses, no farms, not even old billboards, just a long ribbon of cracked pavement swallowing us whole. Every few seconds I checked the mirrors out of habit, half expecting to see another set of headlights or even a reflector post. But there was nothing. The deeper we went, the more wrong the route felt. Lucas asked if we should turn around, and I remember telling him we'd do it at the next wide shoulder, but none ever showed up. It was as if the road had been designed without a single place to pull off, like some kind of one-way chute. Then somewhere around the 6th or 7th mile, 2 lights appeared behind us. They materialized in the rearview mirror so quietly that I didn't notice right away. Perfectly centered, perfectly steady. I pointed them out to the others, expecting to feel some small relief that at least one other person had been shoved down this detour with us. But the longer I watched those headlights, the stranger they felt. They never shifted, never dipped, never brightened. No matter how much I sped up or eased off the gas, they held the exact same distance, like the driver was matching me with machine-like precision. Haley whispered, "Why aren't they getting closer?" And the air inside the car tightened, the first hint that we'd wandered somewhere we weren't meant to be. I eased my foot onto the brake, thinking maybe the driver behind us would react, show some sign of being human, of paying attention, but their headlights didn't waver. Not even a tremble across the beams. The moment my speed dropped below 30, Haley told me she felt like the trees were leaning in closer, as if the road was squeezing us. Lucas suggested we pull a 3-point turn right there, narrow road or not. The idea sounded reckless, but something inside me pushed hard in that direction. I slowed enough to feel the wheels grip the rough pavement and started looking for even the smallest break in the shoulder, just a sliver of space to turn. We finally spotted a wider patch a little ahead, more a swollen concrete scar than a real turnout, and I steered toward it with the kind of focus you only get when your nerves are stretched thin. The second I angled the car to turn, the headlights behind us went out. Not faded, gone, as if someone flipped a switch. In the same moment, another set of lights appeared in front of us, far enough away that we couldn't see the vehicle at first. Just the faint outline of a bulky shape blocking the whole road. Whatever it wasn't moving. No rumble of an engine, no brake lights, no sign of life. I pulled the wheel hard to straighten us and rolled forward slowly, trying to make sense of what we were seeing. As we got closer, the outline sharpened into the boxy silhouette of a truck, a big one, the kind used for hauling equipment. But there were no plates, no company logos, nothing except a thick coat of matte paint that seemed to swallow what little light reached it. I rolled down my window a couple of inches, expecting to hear an engine idling or maybe someone shifting inside the cab. Instead, all we heard was the wind threading through the trees and the uneven ticking of our cooling engine. The truck sat dead still, angled just enough to block us completely. Lucas muttered something about getting out and talking to them, but the idea felt impossible. Nothing about the truck suggested. Driver stepped away for a moment. It looked staged, planted, like someone had dragged it there and left it intentionally, waiting for the exact moment we'd try to escape. Haley kept turning in her seat to look behind us, whispering that the other car couldn't have just vanished. When I finally put the car in reverse to back away, Haley gasped so sharply that it made my vision jolt. The headlights were back behind us, same distance as before, same eerie stillness, but now they weren't centered on the road. They were angled slightly, as if whoever was in that car wanted to block us too. We were boxed in, front and back, with nothing but a thin, unmarked strip of forest on either side. I remember gripping the steering wheel so tight I could hear the faint creak of the leather as I told Lucas and Haley to lock their doors. My heartbeat felt loud enough to echo in the cabin, and for a second, none of us spoke. It hit us all at the same time. That detour sign wasn't there to help drivers. It was there to collect them. The only option left was the forest, but stepping out into that wall of trees felt like trading one danger for another. The branches on both sides pressed so close to the road that they formed a jagged barrier, like an uneven row of ribs. I kept the engine running, hoping maybe one of the vehicles would move, reveal some kind of logic behind all this. Instead, both sets of lights held their positions with that same unnatural precision. Lucas leaned toward the windshield, squinting as if he could make out a silhouette inside the truck ahead of us. "There's someone in there," he whispered, even though none of us could actually see anything. The idea alone was enough to make the air grow heavier. It meant someone had been watching us from the moment we turned off the highway. Haley's voice was barely above a breath when she suggested cutting through the trees on foot and trying to reach the main road again. The thought of leaving the car behind made my chest tighten, but staying felt worse. I opened the door slowly, half expecting the truck's lights to flare on or the car behind us to start creeping forward. Nothing moved. No engines, no footsteps. Just the hum of insects and a faint clicking sound coming from deep in the woods. Sharp, irregular, almost mechanical. We grabbed whatever we could carry fast. Haley's backpack, a flashlight, my phone, Lucas's pocket knife. The moment we stepped off the asphalt, the darkness between the trees swallowed us in a way headlights never could. The forest floor was uneven, packed with brambles that scratched at our legs as we pushed through. I kept glancing back, trying to catch a glimpse of the road through the branches, but it vanished behind layers of tangled limbs. At one point, we heard something move parallel to us. Slow, deliberate steps that weren't in sync with ours. Lucas raised his finger to his lips, and we all froze mid-stride, trying to listen past our own breathing. The steps stopped too. Then came the sound again, that clicking faster now as if reacting to our presence. Haley grabbed my arm, her grip like a clamp, and whispered that she saw something standing between two trees ahead. I didn't see it, but I believed her instantly. She described a tall figure, too still, its outline wrong somehow, like it was leaning at an angle that didn't match the slope of the ground. We kept moving, faster this time, pushing through branches that snapped back in our faces. The forest eventually thinned enough that we could see a faint glow through the trees. Artificial light, warm and steady. Relief rushed through us so suddenly I felt dizzy. We stumbled out onto a dirt driveway leading to a small house with a porch light flickering weakly. It looked lived in, not abandoned, and the sight of an actual structure after all that darkness felt unreal. Lucas walked ahead and knocked on the door with the side of his fist, calling out to whoever lived there. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Still nothing. As we stood there, catching our breath and listening for any hint of movement inside, the porch light brightened for a moment, then dimmed until it was barely glowing, as if it was struggling to stay alive. Lucas tried the door handle gently, and to our surprise, it wasn't locked. The door swung inward just enough to reveal a narrow hallway lit by a single lamp placed on a small table. The lamp's shade was tilted at an odd angle, casting long diagonal shadows across the walls. Everything inside looked untouched, like someone had stepped out only minutes earlier. Shoes by the door, a jacket draped over a chair, a half-finished cup of coffee on the counter in the next room. But there was no sound, no voices, no TV hum, no footsteps, just that thick, unbroken quiet that instantly made us second-guess stepping inside. Haley whispered that it felt wrong to just barge in, but the woods behind us felt worse. We crossed the threshold together. The deeper we walked, the clearer it became that whoever lived there had left in a hurry. A drawer in the living room sat open, its contents scattered across the rug. A phone charger dangled halfway out of the wall, the outlet plate slightly cracked as if it had been yanked at an angle. On the kitchen table, a folded map lay open to a page marked with several circles made in red ink. When I pulled it closer, I saw that one of the circles matched the area we had driven into, the exact spot where the fake detour had led us. More circles spread outward in jagged, uneven loops, each marking other lonely patches of roads and forest routes. It looked like someone had been tracking incidents, or maybe planning them. A low vibration came from the hallway behind us, a deep rumble that made the floorboards tremble under our feet. Lucas stepped back toward the front window and peeked outside. His breath caught sharply as he told us the truck and the other car were now parked at the end of the driveway, side by side. Their lights were off, but their shapes were unmistakable. They hadn't followed us through the woods. There was no way. But they were here now, positioned as if they'd been waiting the whole time. I moved closer to the window, and that's when I saw movement near the tree line. Several figures, tall and rigid, standing between the branches. Their outlines were faint, almost blending with the shadows, but their heads were turned toward the house. Watching, waiting, we didn't stay long after that. Didn't stay long. The three of us bolted out the back door, sprinted across an open field behind the house, and didn't stop until we reached a service road with enough light to see the cracked pavement beneath our feet. A passing driver finally stopped when we flagged him down, and he drove us straight to the nearest town. We tried reporting what happened, but the sheriff's office brushed it off as kids messing around with fake signs. No investigation, no acknowledgement of the vehicles or the figures in the woods. A week later, when we went back with another friend during daylight, the detour sign was gone. The back road was sealed off with fresh gravel, and the house we'd found was boarded up like it had been abandoned for years. I don't know who set that trap or why, but I know we weren't the first ones they funneled in there, and I'm terrified to think we might not have been the last. Most evenings back then ended the same way for me, finishing a long shift at a warehouse on the outskirts of a quiet town, then taking the same stretch of highway back to the small rental house I shared with my cousin. My schedule was all over the place, so heading home close to midnight wasn't unusual. I remember that specific night clearly because I'd been feeling oddly alert, like my brain wouldn't shut off even though my body was exhausted. The highway was nearly empty, just a thin ribbon of pavement lit by my headlights, and the air felt heavy in that way it sometimes does before a storm. I kept the radio low, mostly just to have a voice in the car with me, something familiar to break up the long, dark road. The drive had always been uneventful, so when lights started flickering behind me, it took a second for it to register. At first, I wasn't even sure they were meant for me. They didn't look like the sharp red and blue flashes I'd seen on patrol cars before. These were more like someone rapidly turning a bright white spotlight on and off. I eased off the gas, checking the rear view a few times, trying to make out a silhouette or some kind of clear sign. The vehicle behind me stayed close, but not aggressively so, like whoever was driving wanted to seem official without actually showing anything that proved it. I figured maybe they were using some kind of auxiliary lights or had a malfunctioning bar. Instinct kicked in, and I signaled before pulling onto the gravel shoulder. Dust swirled up in small clouds as I rolled to a stop. My heart wasn't racing yet, but there was this slow, creeping tension in my chest, the kind that builds before your mind can explain why. The other vehicle stopped a few feet behind me, and for a moment, everything was silent, except for the faint hum of my engine. I kept both hands on the wheel out of habit, watching the side mirror. A figure stepped out, someone tall wearing a reflective vest that caught the headlights in sharp flashes, almost too bright to look at directly. The person walked up slowly, not hurried, not cautious, but measured in a way that felt unnatural for anyone responding to a traffic stop. There were no visible patches, no badge glinting in the light, no radio clipped anywhere, nothing that would reassure me. The vest looked generic, the kind you could buy from a hardware store. When they reached my window, they leaned down just enough for me to see the lower half of their face, clean-shaven, jaw tight, breathing steady like they'd practiced this. Before I could speak or reach for my documents, they tapped the glass twice with a gloved knuckle and said, "Go ahead and unlock your door." The tone wasn't official or polite. It was sharp, impatient, like they were waiting for me to make the wrong move. The moment those words hit me, something inside tightened, the same instinct you get when you step somewhere and realize the ground isn't stable. I didn't move right away, partly because my brain was still scrambling to understand what was happening, partly because the tone he used didn't fit anything I'd ever heard from an actual officer. He reached for the door handle without waiting for my response, fingers curling around it like he'd done it 100 times before. I saw the glint of something metallic on his wrist. Not a badge, just a cheap watch with a cracked face, and the way the reflective vest hung loose on him, like it wasn't his size. That detail stuck with me for reasons I didn't fully grasp in the moment. I kept my foot ready near the pedal, but I didn't dare move too fast. He tugged at the handle, but the door stayed locked. That seemed to irritate him. He leaned closer, angling his head like he was trying to see further into my car. The beam from his flashlight slid across my dashboard, then up toward my face, lingering a second too long. "Unlock it," he said again, lower this time, like he was trying not to lose his temper. There was no explanation, no mention of why he'd stopped me, nothing about a violation or even a request for identification. Just that command. A real officer would have asked me to roll the window down, not go straight for the door. And that's when a realization settled in, not sudden but heavy, spreading through my thoughts like cold water. My voice came out steadier than I expected when I asked, "Can I see your identification?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he straightened up slightly and lifted the flashlight so the beam pointed away from my eyes, revealing more of his face. His expression wasn't calm or neutral. It was tight, focused, like he was evaluating how difficult I would be to control. His lips pressed together, and then he let out a short exhale through his nose. "Don't make this harder," he said, and the way he said it made every muscle in my body go rigid. That wasn't a request, and it wasn't a warning. It sounded like a script he'd used before. When he tried the handle again, harder this time, I knew I had only seconds. The shoulder of the highway was empty in both directions. No traffic in sight, no lights except our two vehicles. If I got out or let him in, the night would swallow me before anyone noticed. My pulse thudded in my ears as I weighed my options. The stranger shifted his stance, bracing one hand on the roof of my car like he was preparing to yank the door open by force. I could hear the gravel crunching under his boots, each small movement sharp and deliberate. That sound, oddly enough, became the final push I needed to act. I slammed my foot on the gas before he could react, tires spitting gravel as the car lurched forward. The sudden movement threw him off balance. I caught a glimpse of him stumbling back in my side mirror, one arm raised like he was about to shout something. The moment the wheels hit pavement again, I pushed the accelerator harder than I ever had. My hands gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles felt stiff, but all I could think was distance. I needed as much distance between me and that man as possible. The white flickering lights behind me vanished fast, swallowed by the darkness as the road opened ahead. For a few seconds I drove without breathing, waiting for the nightmare to reappear in my rear view. A mile or two down, I spotted an exit for a small gas station that stayed open late, the kind with a flickering sign and old vending machines outside. I pulled in, parking right under the brightest lamp I could find, and kept the engine running. The place wasn't crowded, but there were at least a few people inside, and that alone brought a wave of relief. As I sat there trying to steady myself, I kept replaying the details: the generic vest, the lack of markings, the way he went straight for the door. None of it matched any real traffic stop protocol. Whoever he wasn't out there to write a citation. He had approached me with purpose, and that purpose sure wasn't legal. After a minute, I forced myself to walk inside. The clerk looked around my age and had earbuds in, completely oblivious to how rattled I must have seemed. But just being around other people grounded me. I told him someone pretending to be law enforcement had tried to pull me over, and his expression changed fast. He glanced toward the windows like he expected to see someone waiting outside. "That's been happening a few towns over," he said quietly. "People getting flagged down on empty stretches. Cops are warning folks not to stop unless they see proper markings." Hearing that didn't comfort me. It confirmed exactly what I feared. This wasn't random. Someone was using the darkness and isolation to pick targets. I waited at the station until another customer, a middle-aged woman, was heading out, and I asked if I could follow her car back toward town. She didn't hesitate to say yes. Driving behind her, both of us sticking to well-lit areas, felt like moving through a different world than the one I'd escaped earlier. When I finally reached home and locked the door behind me, the weight of what could have happened hit all at once. I reported the incident the next morning. They took the statement seriously, but no one ever followed up with an arrest or a suspect. To this day, the most unsettling part is realizing how carefully that man had chosen his spot and his moment. A stretch of road where a uniform was only a suggestion and help was nearly impossible to reach. I still take that highway sometimes. But I never pull over for anyone unless I see a marked car and official lights. And even then, I always keep the doors locked until I'm absolutely sure who's standing outside.